Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.
So in this lecture, this is the last lecture of anatomy, in which we will briefly study about the development of the whole of the gastrointestinal system. So by the end of this lecture, we should know the development of the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, as well as the large intestine. Also, you will study about the anomalies related to the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, as well as the two related organs of the GIS, that is the liver and pancreas. Also, we will study the development as well as the anomalies. As you know, the GIT or the GIS is the whole system which is from the buccopharyngeal membrane up to the cloacal membrane. This is the developing embryo. So the GIT develops from the begins from the buccopharyngeal membrane and ends at the cloacal membrane. And if you remember, this is developed from the yolk sac. So this is the yolk sac here. A part of the yolk sac get invaginated when the head fold and tail fold. The embryo starts folding itself. It picks up a part of the yolk sac and it is pulled inside, and this whole part becomes the digestive system. The initial part which is near the head, this will be called as the foregut. The middle part which is in contact with the yolk sac, that will be called as the midgut, and the part which is at the tail end, that will form the hindgut. So this whole digestive system is developing actually from the yolk sac. The endoderm forms the epithelial lining of the alimentary canal. So the yolk sac and its endoderm, which is invaginated, it will form the lining epithelium for the alimentary canal. And you might have studied the lining epithelium of the whole of the GIT in the histology. While the splanchnic mesoderm forms the surrounding muscles and cord, and it is lined by the muscle coat as well as the tunica adventitia. All these are from the splanchnic mesoderm. So the yolk sac will give rise to the endothelium, and the remaining part will be by the splanchnic mesoderm. So this is how it is developing from the invaginated part of the yolk sac. So as I said, it is divided into foregut, midgut, and hindgut. As you can see in this picture, near the head will be the foregut, the middle part will be the midgut, and the part which is near the tail, that will form the hindgut. Now from the foregut, there is development of a very important structure that is called as the esophagus. So the esophagus develops from the upper part of the foregut, which extends from the laryngotracheal groove to the fusiform part, which forms the stomach. So it starts from there is a structure where the larynx end and the esophagus begins, and behind in front of that will be the trachea. So this will begin from the laryngotracheal groove and ends at the opening of the stomach. At first it is short tube initially, but when the heart descends, it elongates rapidly. If you remember, the heart initially it will be near the head. Slowly it starts descending downwards. So as the heart descends downwards, this part of the foregut elongates to form the long esophagus. So initially it will be short, later it elongates because of the descent of the heart. So some of the congenital anomalies related to this esophagus are, one is called as the atresia or the stenosis of the esophagus. If you see here, so here the esophagus has totally failed to develop. That is called as atresia, or where it becomes totally collapsed and it doesn't have any opening. Okay, that is called as the atresia or stenosis. When it is narrowing, that is called as the stenosis. Total blocking, that is called as atresia. When it is becoming narrow, that is called as stenosis. So either of these condition can develop because of the improper development of the esophagus. Then sometimes it also leads to tracheoesophageal fistula. So if you see here, so sometimes the esophagus, instead of opening directly into the stomach, it start opening into the trachea itself. That is called as the tracheoesophageal fistula. If you can see here, so you can see a fistula here, as well. This is also a fistula where the upper esophagus is opening into trachea, as well as the lower part of the esophagus is also opening. opening from the trachea. So this is called as the tracheoesophageal fistula. There are different types, like atresia with the distal fistula, atresia with double fistula. There are two fistulas. Fistula means opening. Atresia with proximal fistula. Initial part of the esophagus is opening into the trachea. Sometimes there is total block. Here there is no fistula, only atresia. That is, there is total block and there is no communication between the upper part and the lower part of the esophagus. This is the total atresia. And sometimes there might be congenital short esophagus, as we saw, because of the descent of the heart, it elongates, but sometimes it might remain as short esophagus. Okay. Coming to the development of the stomach, so initially the stomach looks very similar to the other parts of the GIT. It will be like a long tube. Okay, it appears as a tube in the midline from the foregut, so it doesn't look different from the other parts of the esophagus. Only when it starts expanding, then we come to know that this part will become the stomach. So this has a ventral and dorsal mesentery. If you see here, so it is covered by peritoneum in the front and back. The front part will be called as the ventral mesentery, and the part which is behind that will be called as the dorsal mesentery. So this should be taken as the front part, and this as the posterior part. If you take a section at this level, this is how it looks like. Okay, this is the stomach growing, and here if you see, this is the ventral mesentery, this is the dorsal mesentery. This is the front anterior part, and this is the posterior part. Okay, so the stomach tube dilates and becomes fusiform. Now slowly it starts differentiating itself from the other parts of the GIT, that it starts dilating. So if you can see here in the different stages, it is dilating much more and becomes fusiform. The dorsal border elongates more and forms the greater curvature, while the ventral border forms the lesser curvature. If you see the ventral border, it grows a little, and so it is called as the lesser curvature. But the dorsal part, the dorsal border grows much more larger or much more faster, and it becomes dilated, and this becomes the later greater curvature because it expands or develops to a much larger extent, so it is called as greater. Okay, and it is curved, so it will be called a greater curvature, and this ventral part will become the lesser curvature. The fundus appear as dilatation on the upper part of the stomach, and as it starts dilating the dorsal part, so a part will go above the opening of the esophagus, so that part will be called as the fundus of the stomach. Now the stomach rotates 90 degrees to the right, so the left and right surface become the anterior and posterior border. If you see here, now as it starts developing, now it starts rotating. If you see here, it rotates 90 degrees. So this will be the anterior, this is the posterior part. So this is called a ventral mesentery, this is the dorsal mesentery. So this ventral mesentery, which is ventral initially, it goes towards the right side, and dorsal mesentery comes towards the left side. And there are two surfaces. This is the right surface and the left surface. This right and left surface now become, the left surface becomes the anterior surface. Instead of left, it becomes anterior as it goes front, and the right surface will go behind and becomes the posterior surface of the stomach. Okay, so now what you see later in the later stages, the anterior and posterior surface are nothing but the initially in the initial stages it will be the right and left surface. Because of the rotation of the stomach to 90 degree, now they become the anterior and posterior surface. The ventral and dorsal mesenteries form the omenta and the peritoneal ligaments related to the stomach, and these ventral and dorsal mesentery will actually form some very important ligaments. The ventral mesentery, within the ventral mesentery will be the development of the liver itself. Now, coming to some of the important congenital anomalies. One is the improper development of the stomach curvatures might lead to a condition called as hourglass stomach. Hourglass stomach, where it looks like a hourglass. You might have seen the hourglass with the narrow in the center. Above there is sand, and it slowly starts filling into the lower part. So that is called as the hourglass. So The stomach looks very similar to that of the hourglass, so that's what is called as the hourglass stomach. Okay. The second important condition, especially seen in case of the children, very young children with severe vomiting and regurgitation of food because of the improper development of the or the increased development of the pyloric stenosis, where it totally blocks the pyloric part will become stenos, means narrowing, and the food doesn't enter into the duodenum because of the thickening of this sphincter here. So there will be regurgitation, vomiting, and the child starts losing weight and many things. Okay, so this is called as the pyloric stenosis, and this can be treated by the there is a procedure called as the Reed surgery, where with which you cut the pyloric the sphincter at the pylorus and relieve the stenosis. So this is also called as the congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. Pyloric stenosis or the congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. These are some of the anomalies, common anomalies which we see in the clinical side. Now coming to the next part of the GIT, that is the duodenum after the stomach. So the duodenum will develop from the two important parts, as you know, a partly from the foregut and partly from the midgut. This is very important, where you have studied already, where the duodenum will develop from two parts. So that's why the blood supply, venous drainage, lymphatic, as well as even the nerve supply differs. Okay, the proximal part and the distal part. This is because of the upper part develops from the foregut and the lower part of the duodenum develops from the midgut. So the major duodenal papillae lies at the junction of these two portions. So the junction between the foregut is clearly demarcated by the major duodenal papillae, major duodenal opening. The duodenum is attached to the back of the midline by the dorsal mesoduodenum. In the initial stages, there will be a mesentery that is called as the dorsal mesoduodenum. Later it disappears. Later it becomes retroperitoneal. As you know, the duodenum is retroperitoneal. Most of the part will be retroperitoneal. The duodenum rapidly grows to form the C-shaped loop, which is convex ventrally. If you see here, so this is the development of this is the duodenum. Here is the stomach, which has been cut here, not shown. Here only they have shown the development of the duodenum. If you see, this is the initial stages. Now it starts curving itself and it becomes curved, and here is the development of the pancreas. So here now it is totally developed into, as you know, it has four parts: the first part, second part, third part, and fourth part around the head of the pancreas. So initially it will be a long tube. Later it starts bending and forming C-shaped loop with convex ventrally, and later it develops into proper duodenum. The C-shaped loop rotates 90 degrees to the right along with the stomach. When the stomach rotates, even the duodenum will rotate. After rotation, the right layer of the mesentery disappears. As I said, initially it will have mesentery. Later, with this rotation, it disappears, and now the duodenum becomes retroperitoneal, and the duodenum becomes retroperitoneal. Okay, so this is a very important landmark. When the initially the duodenum will have the mesentery, later it disappears with the rotation of the duodenum along with the stomach. Okay, so this is the different stages of development of this duodenum. During the development of the duodenum, because even the liver as well as the pancreas also open at the same junction, that is the major duodenal papillae, so you can see the development of these structures along with the development of the duodenum. If you see here, there will be two buds where the major duodenal papillae is there. There will be two buds initially. Okay, so one is called as the ventral bud here. This is the pancreatic bud. Okay, so that is called a ventral pancreatic bud as well as the hepatic bud. Both will be present together, and there will be dorsal pancreatic bud behind. Okay, so now this hepatic bud will grow larger and larger, and it forms the liver as well as the gallbladder and other parts of the biliary system. Okay, and the pancreas will develop from two buds: dorsal pancreatic bud, as well as the ventral pancreas from the ventral pancreatic bud. Later, how it develops will go into more details. If you see here, so initially this is the showing the how the duodenum will lose its peritoneal covering. So initially there will be pancreas will be at the center, and there will be dorsal mesentery and ventral mesentery. Now with the rotation of 90 degree, now the ventral pancreas will join with the dorsal pancreas here, and this will go and adhere to the posterior abdominal wall. Now both the pancreas as well as the duodenum all will lose their mesentery. This mesentery is here. Now they lose the mesentery, and both these structures becomes retroperitoneal, behind the peritoneum. Okay, so this is how they lose their mesentery. An endodermal hepatic diverticulum develops from the ventral wall of the duodenal loop. So if you can see here, this is the ventral bud where the liver bud is developing, and it forms the hepatic diverticulum, and that will form the liver as well as the bile duct. The hepatic diverticulum grows ventral and cranial to enter the ventral mesentery, as we have seen. So here will be the ventral mesentery. So it will develop, the liver will develop into the ventral mesentery. It is divided into two parts, pars hepatica and pars cystica. If you see here, so there will be two parts initially. If you see here, pars hepatica, this part, and this will be the pars cystica. So if you see here, pars hepatica will be here, pars cystica. If you see here, here it is better. This is the pars hepatica, and this is the pars cystica. So it develops from two parts. Pars hepatica will develop into the liver, and pars cystica will develop into the cystic or the gallbladder. Okay. So it is divided into two parts, pars hepatica and pars cystica. Okay, here you can see here. Okay, so this is the hepatic duct, pars hepatica, and this is the pars cystica. The pars hepatica form the common hepatic duct. So pars hepatica will form the common hepatic duct. It divides into right and left hepatic ducts. The cranial end of the hepatic duct divide to form the liver cells. So the cranial part here will develop into the liver proper. The liver stroma is derived from the ventral mesentery, which is anterior. So again I will show you. So here is this is the ventral mesentery. Okay, so here you can see this is the ventral mesentery. Okay. Okay, the pars cystica gives rise to cystic duct and the gallbladder. As you can see here, this is the pars cystica, which will give rise to the gallbladder as well as the cystic duct. Okay, this is how the liver will develop in the ventral mesentery from the hepatic bud and the cystic bud. Then coming to the development of the pancreas, as we saw, the pancreas will be in the two buds form again, the dorsal pancreatic bud and the ventral pancreatic duct. Ventral pancreatic duct will be along with the hepatic duct here, and the dorsal pancreatic duct will be behind. Okay, so what are the structures which are formed from this pancreatic buds? So if you see the dorsal pancreatic buds, it forms the dorsal wall of the duodenum. It develops from the dorsal wall. Ventral pancreatic duct forms the proximal end of the hepatic diverticulum, as you can see here. The two buds come closer together in concavity. So initially these two buds are separated. Okay, now with the rotation of the stomach and the duodenum, if you see here, this is the ventral pancreatic duct and this is dorsal. Now both will come together, close together. Okay, we'll see that how they rotate. Okay, that okay. So the bud elongates faster, the dorsal bud elongates faster. So this dorsal pancreatic bud elongates faster and forms the head, body as well as the tail of the pancreas. Okay, and most of the pancreas is derived from the dorsal bud. So what is developed from the ventral part? The uncinate process developed from the ventral bud, as well as the inferior part of the a small part of the head also develops from the ventral bud. So most of the part develops of the pancreas develops from the dorsal pancreatic bud. So the ventral pancreatic bud only give rise to the uncinate process as well as some part of the head, that is the inferior part. Now coming to the congenital anomalies related to this pancreatic bud. Okay, so if there are any changes, what will happen to the pancreas? So it leads to a condition called as annular pancreas or ectopic pancreas. if you see during the development, if the whole of the duodenum is covered, instead of just rotating, if these buds grow around the duodenum, this is the duodenum as you know. Okay, so if it grows around the duodenum, then it is called as the annular pancreas. Annular pancreas, where the duodenum is compressed as well as stenosis, and that leads to a lot of complications. The second is the ectopic pancreas. Instead of the pancreas developing here, some part of the pancreas might develop in some other region. That is called as the ectopic pancreas. Now coming to the development of the small intestine. Small intestine play very important role in the development of the abdomen itself, as well as the abdominal wall, as well as the intestine themselves. So there are 5 stages under which the small intestine will develop. So this is a lengthy process and it is under 5 stages. So what are those stages? The first stage is called as pre-herniation. Herniation means any content of the abdomen coming out, that is called as herniation. Okay, so this is called as, the first stage is called as pre-herniation. Before the herniation, the stage is called as pre-herniation. The next, second stage is called as the stage of physiological umbilical hernia, where the all the intestine will come out through the umbilicus. That is called as the, if you see here, the contents will come out. Later we'll discuss. All the contents will come out of the abdomen. So this is called as physiological, because this is not pathological. Later we'll see how the physiological will differ from the pathological. So this is physiological because it is normal, and later it returns back. Okay. Then once it comes out of the umbilicus, then it leads to rotation of the midgut loop. There will be rotation. We'll say how the rotation will take place. Then after rotation, the stage of reduction of the umbilical hernia. Now all the intestines which have come out, now they will return back. So that's why it is called as physiological. If it is pathological, it will remain outside. But here it will go back. This is normal during the development of the fetus. Okay. Then the fifth stage is stage of fixation of the various part of the intestine. Now all the intestines will go inside, and all the organs will properly form and they in their proper places. So this is called as the stage of fixation. So these are the 5 stages: pre-herniation, physiological umbilical hernia, then rotation of the midgut loop, reduction, and fixation. These are the 5 stages. So we'll try to understand each of these stages. Okay. So by the beginning of 6th week, midgut elongates to form a ventral U-shaped midgut loop. If you see here, so initially there will be a loop formation. Okay, so this is called as the ventral U-shaped midgut loop. Okay, midgut loop communicates with the yolk sac. If you see here, it will communicate with the yolk sac. Okay, by the vitelline duct. There is a duct, small thin duct, this is called a vitelline duct, or the yolk stalk. Yolk stalk is the narrowing of the yolk sac. When the yolk sac becomes smaller and narrow, that is called as the yolk stalk. Okay. As a result of rapidly growing liver, kidney, and gut, the abdominal cavity is temporarily too small to contain the developing, rapidly growing intestinal leaves. So at the same time, when the liver is growing, the kidneys and other abdominal organs are growing, even the intestine starts growing. So this leads to a very small area filled with lot of organs. So that's why all the organs now come out, especially the intestine. So the midgut loop projects into the umbilical cord. So it will project. This is called a physiological umbilical hernia. So they will, all the intestines will come out as the physiological umbilical hernia. So this begins at the 6th week. Now what happens in the second stage, rotation of the midgut loop. Okay, so midgut loop has a cranial limb and a caudal limb. If you see, this is the loop. So it has a cranial end, or which is also called as cephalic limb, or the cranial. Then the other part is called as caudal limb, or the tail limb. Okay, which is towards the tail. So the initial part, this is the cephalic or cranial part. So it has 2 loops. Okay. The midgut loop rotates along the axis of the superior mesenteric artery. If you see here, this is the axis of the superior mesenteric. Now, the intestines will start rotating. If you see here, now after the loop, initially this is the loop and cephalic end is upper and caudal end is lower. Now with the rotation, the cephalic end has gone down. So this is the cephalic end, which is the cranial end, and the caudal end has gone up. So this is the rotation. So the midgut loop rotates 90 degrees to the right so that the cranial limb becomes right. So the cranial limb becomes right and the caudal limb becomes left during the physiological herniation. Okay, so they starts rotating and change their position. The cranial limb of the midgut loop elongates to form the intestinal coil, jejunum, and ileum. So if you see here, the cranial end, which has now come down, now it starts growing to form the, the coils of the jejunum and the ileum. This rotation is counterclockwise and is completed to 270 degrees. So after the reduction of the physiologic hernia, it rotates to about 180 degrees. Now there is reverse rotation of 270 degrees. So in total, it will be initially 90 degrees, then reverse rotation to 270 degrees. So there will be 180 degree rotation of the intestine. This is called as the rotation of the midgut loop. Now what happens? Now as the abdomen starts growing, as the fetus starts growing, now the abdomen becomes bigger and all the intestines will go back to their return back. This is called as the return of the midgut to the abdomen. During the 10th week, the intestine return to the abdominal cavity due to regression of the liver, kidney, and expansion of the abdominal cavity. Now the abdomen becomes larger, so it can hold all the intestines, so they go back. It is called as reduction of the physiological midgut hernia. So this is also physiological, normal. Okay. Rotation is completed and the coiled intestine loops lies in the final position, that is the left side. So now they start arranging themselves into their normal, proper anatomical positions. The cecum first lies below the liver. If you see here, this is the liver here. Just below that is the cecum initially, but later it descends to the right ilia fossa. Now, as the intestine grow, the cecum will come down and goes to the right ilia fossa. That is the normal anatomical position. So now all these organs have rearranged themselves into normal anatomical position. Now coming to the fixation of the various parts of the intestine. So with this rotation, there will be fixation of many organs which will come to their normal exact position. So one is the enlarged colon presses the duodenum and pancreas against the posterior abdominal wall. Most of the duodenum mesentery absorbs, so most of the duodenum except the first inch and the pancreas become retroperitoneal. If you see here, initially they will have the mesentery as we saw before. Then they are pushed all. Now they are pushed into the back of the wall. Now they become retroperitoneal. This is the pancreas. This is the duodenum. And how they become retroperitoneal, I already showed you with the previous pictures as we saw here. So here was the picture showing you the how the duodenum, which has a mesentery, and the pancreas has a mesentery. They all go back to the posterior abdominal wall. Here, if you see here, these are the two major arteries, artery and the vein, aorta and the inferior vena cava, and just in front of them, these will sit and lose their mesentery behind, and they become retroperitoneal. Now coming to the clinical aspect of how this is important, this rotation of the midgut loop, and how, because sometimes in the congenital, these are the newborns with the intestines outside. So if you can see here, so the here is the umbilical cord, and here the intestinal loops covered by amnion. Here you can see here, this is also amnion. Inside will be the intestine. Here still the umbilical cord is attached. Okay. It is the persistence of the herniation of the abdominal content into the proximal part of the umbilical cord. Okay, so if you see umbilical cord, so in the proximal part it is present still there due to failure of reduction of the physiological hernia. If it reduces, back into the abdomen, then it is called as the normal physiological hernia. But if it fails to reduce, then it becomes pathological at the if it doesn't reduce by the 10th week, the physiological hernia becomes pathological. Now it is called as congenital omphocele. It is called as congenital omphocele. Okay, so this is seen. The herniation of the intestine occurs in 1 out of 5,000 births. This kind of condition is seen in 1 in 5,000 births, and herniation of the liver and intestine occurs in 1 of 10,000 births. Out of this uh, 10,000 births, around 1 to 2 will have the liver herniation as well as the intestinal herniation. Okay, so this is seen in 1 or 2 cases in every 10,000. Okay, so this is called as congenital omphocele, where the intestines which have come out physiological but they don't return back physiologically. Okay, now if you see here, so this is the abdominal wall, these are the intestines covered by the amnion outside, and here is the umbilical cord. Okay, so that's why you should know this is because of the failure of the intestines to reduce back or return back to the intestine. Okay, into the abdomen. It is accompanied by small abdominal cavity also. The hernial sac is covered by epithelia of the umbilical cord and the amnion. As you can see here, it is covered by the amnion. Okay, as well as the epithelia of the umbilical cord. So immediate surgical repair is required in such kind of patients, newborns. Immediate surgical repair is uh, necessary, and all the intestines are returned back into the abdominal cavity, and the abdominal wall opening is closed. Okay. Sometimes you can also see the congenital umbilical hernia. Okay. The intestine returned to the abdominal cavity by the 10th week, as we know. That is called as the physiological return of the intestines. Okay. But hernia through an imperfectly closed umbilicus. Sometimes without any herniation of the intestine, only a part of the umbilical part will remain patent, and that leads to the small part of the opening present, and this is called as this is because of the imperfectly closed umbilicus. It is the umbilicus doesn't close, that leads to some of the protrusion of some of the abdominal contents will come out. So this is called as congenital umbilical hernia. It is common type of hernia. The herniated contents are usually greater omentum or the small intestine. So a small here the whole intestines have most of the intestine have come out, but here only a part of it, especially the small intestine or sometimes the greater omentum will herniate through this umbilical opening. Okay, this is called as the congenital umbilical hernia. So congenital umbilical hernia is different from that of the congenital omphocele. So the hernial sac is covered by skin and subcutaneous tissue. Even if you see here, here it is covered by the amnion, but here it is covered by the skin itself as well as the subcutaneous tissue also. So you cannot see any the contents. Here you can see the even the intestines can be seen here, but here you cannot see the intestine because it is covered by the skin. Skin is intact here. It protrudes during crying, straining, or coughing and can be easily reduced through the fibrous ring at the umbilicus. So this can be seen when the child cries. At that time, the umbilicus starts protruding, and during maturation, defecation, this is called as straining, or coughing, it will come out. The intestinal the abdominal contents will protrude out through the hernia. This is called as the congenital umbilical hernia. So surgery is performed at the age of 3 to 5 years. Here in case of the congenital omphocele, immediate surgery is required. But in case of this congenital umbilical hernia, usually the surgery required is at the age of 3 to 5 years. So here you can see a patient, a small infant with a congenital umbilical hernia. This is not omphocele as you can see here. So here this is the omphocele. Okay, and this is just the hernia. If you see here, one more child with the umbilical hernia. Now coming to one more important structure called as the ileal diverticulum, or it is also called as the Michel's diverticulum. This is clinically very important structure because Michel's diverticulum is normal in some of the patients, but it can create problems. Okay. So it is one of the most common anomaly of the digestive tract present in about 2 to 4% of the people. So it is present in 2 to 4% of the people, and it is more common in case of male than the female. Okay, so it is small pouch from the ileum. So if you see here, this is the ileum. From there, a small pouch develops. This is called as the Michel's diverticulum. Okay, and may contain small patches of the gastric or pancreatic tissue causing ulceration, bleeding, or even perforation. So here there might be ectopic pancreas or the gastric part, or some other structures might grow here as ectopic structures, and then this is also the site for ulceration, bleeding, or even perforation. And the person, the doctor will be thinking of the gastric ulceration, and actually the perforation might be here, and he might be thinking these all these symptoms are because of the gastric peptic ulcers, but actually the ulcers might be in the Michel's diverticulum. So this will might be a hidden site where there might be some complications which doesn't resolve and cannot be diagnosed easily. This is called as the Michel's diverticulum. So it is nothing but the remnant of the proximal part of the non-oblated part of the yolk sac. So what is this Michel's diverticulum? It is nothing but the non-oblated part of the yolk sac. Sometimes a part here, if you see here, the yolk sac totally disappears to form the vitelline ligament. So sometimes a small part of it might remain as the non-oblated part of the yolk sac, and that leads to a condition called as Michel's diverticulum, which is seen in 2 to 4% of the people. It arises from the anti-mesenteric border of the ileum, 2 feet from the ileocecal junction. 2 feet from the ileocecal junction, 2% of the people, more of common in the male. It is sometimes become inflamed, as I said, and causes symptoms that mimic appendicitis. It can also mimic symptoms of the appendicitis. So if there is any disease with undiagnosed signs and symptoms which cannot be resolved even by the proper treatment, then we should look for the Michel's diverticulum. Okay. It may be connected to the umbilicus by the fibrous cord. If you see here, this will be the fibrous cord, and the middle portion forms the cyst. Sometimes, instead of the Michel's diverticulum, a part might remain patent inside within the this cord, which is the vitelline ligament, and this leads to a condition called as vitelline cyst. So there might be a cyst formation, or may remain patent, totally patent throughout, forming the fistula. This is called as the vitelline fistula, and the fecal matter may be carried out through this umbilicus. So if it remains patent, usually it has to block. Okay, sometimes it remains patent, which leads to fecal matter coming out through the umbilicus. So here there are some of the congenital anomalies shown here. This is the condition of the omphocyl, where the intestines have come out and there is covered by the amnion. So it is transparent, so you can see the intestines, as well as there is improper development of the abdominal wall. This is a condition of the Michel's diverticulum where it is inflamed and it mimics the symptoms of the appendicitis. Okay. And here you already see this picture where you can see the Michel's diverticulum. Sometimes there can be vitelline cyst and sometimes there can be vitelline fistula. So all these are some of the important congenital anomalies which are developing from the proximal and middle part of the gut. Sometimes, now coming to the hind gut, the last part, especially the last part where the urogenital structures will develop. So during the 7th week, the cloacal membrane disappears. Here is the cloacal membrane, which will disappear, exposing the ventral urogenital sinus opening and dorsal anal opening. If you see here, this is the site of the urogenital sinus, and then it develops into two parts. One is the urogenital sinus here, the proximal part, and the distal part will be the dorsal anal opening. The tip of the urorectal septum separates the two openings from the perineal body. So if you see here, urorectal septum will be separating the urogenital sinus from the anal sinus. This is very important. If it doesn't develop, then there might start communicating between the rectum and the urogenital sinus. The urorectal septum grows to downwards toward the cloacal membrane but does not fuse with it. It is derived from the mesoderm at the junction between the connecting stalk and the yolk sac. This is the urorectal septum, which is separating the urogenital sinus from where the urinary bladder as well as the urethra all develops, and the anal opening from where the anal canal rectum all develop. Okay. So here you can see again the urogenital septum, and in the front you can see this is the ventral part from where the urinary bladder as well as the urethra is developing, and the dorsal part, the anorectal canal, which will develop into the rectum as well as the anal canal. So here you can see again the urogenital sinus and the anal sinus, and these two are separated by the septum here, which is called as the urorectal septum, as well as there is a small body here, this is called as the perineal body. Okay, so here you can see the urogenital sinus is developing into the bladder and the urethra, and the rectal sinus is developing into rectum as well as the anal canal and different parts of the anal canal. Now coming to the anomalies of the rectum and the anal canal, one is the imperforate anus. Sometimes the opening of the anal canal doesn't open up. Okay, so it is totally closed. That is called as the imperforate anus. Okay, so at that time, if it is imperforate anus, then it starts opening into the urethra. So the actually the feces starts coming out through the urethra, and it might be in the membranous urethra or sometimes in the prostatic urethra. So this is how it is opening. Okay, sometimes there might be imperforate totally blockage, and sometimes it starts opening into the urethra. So this condition is called as imperforate anus, where it is totally blocked. And the second is the atresia of the rectum. Sometimes instead of in the anal canal, it might be in the higher up in the rectum. It is called as atresia of the rectum. And sometimes the rectal fistula, the fistula develops from the rectum into the different parts, maybe into the urethra, like here, as we can see in this picture. Okay. So these are some of the congenital anomalies of the rectum and the anal canal. So this is all about the development of the gastrointestinal system, starting from the esophagus. Then we discuss the stomach. Then we discuss about the liver as well as the development of the pancreas. Then we discuss about the different stages, the 5 stages of the intestine development, and finally we discuss about the rectum as well as the anal canal as well as the urogenital sinus. Okay, so this is all about the development of the gastrointestinal system, and this is the last lecture of anatomy in this course. So if you have any questions regarding this, you can ask me now.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Okay, then if you don't have any questions, we'll stop here. Thank you very much.